I know I said these Friday dev blogs tend to not be worth covering in my last monthly moan, but in a turn up for the bucks, this one is quite juicy for us gameplay enthusiasts out there, and I think actually helps me to illustrate a number of issues I have with Payday 3's design philosophy quite succinctly. So yeah, this is going to be a slightly strange video, because I'm coming at it from a few different angles. I commend the intention of what Mio and the team are trying to achieve with the loud modifiers and the game balance at the moment. I've gone on record and said avoiding enemy health bloat was an excellent move, but I also think they're really papering over the cracks at this stage when it comes to integrating some more challenge in the game, and are missing all the fundamental game design elephants in the room that's making the process so difficult for them. Payday 3 is built on frankly shaky foundations. I don't think skill lines really work, it's why builds are homogeneous and unique playstyles don't exist, and I also think the game is easy in ways that are incredibly challenging to tweak. Heists end too quickly and are entirely predictable, cop spawns are repetitive, resources feel virtually infinite, and the meta playstyle doesn't have any counters. These loud modifiers almost universally fail to tackle any of these distinct problems, so at best they'll exist as a minor distraction, and at worst, you won't even notice they were there. I say all of this to preface my primary thesis on Payday 3's gameplay issues. I believe the game is fundamentally flawed, to the point where fun can still be found, but it'll never capture a long-term audience, and these sorts of scrambled together fixes will never be sufficient to change the game's trajectory. Let's have a look at what Mio has to say to explain these changes and why I don't think it's going to achieve its desired outcome. First of all, hats off for addressing the difficulty issues. Starbreeze knows the game is too easy after update 5 and wants to approach this problem with some nuance, instead of just resorting to directly buffing cop health and damage, as so many of us feared. They also mention May or June for the addition of these modifiers, which suggests it's going to be released not in the next update, but the one that's due to follow, as we keep with this monthly update cadence. Anyway, I generally agree with not aggressively trying to tackle adrenaline directly. I think it's one bad nerf away from being useless, so it is probably better to balance around rather than smack down in its prime. The more indirect approach of buffing specials damage against the adrenaline health bar specifically makes sense, although I still anticipate adrenaline will remain meta with that in mind. Where I do start to disagree with this blog though is when Mio approaches the issue of cutting shot. This skill, which was already widely used, received a sizable buff in Update 5, granting a massive penetration multiplier to most weapons in the game and pushing certain fully auto guns like the Ku-59 and Kar-4 into the one-shot kill territory, leaving them undoubtedly overpowered. The way they intend to balance this quite frankly inexplicably strong skill is by moving its effect over to high grain, so that for 30 seconds after grabbing ammo, you'll get the full impact of old cutting shot, limiting its application to a timer, placing it in a less popular skill line, and dare I say it, adding another element of micromanagement to optimizing combat in Payday 3. And look, I get it, I don't think adding pen to an ammo skill is a terrible idea, it even makes thematic sense as you could be loading your gun with FMJ rounds. My problem is that this is another instance of designing a broken skill, not knowing how to directly balance it, so basically trying to hide it in another skill line. It's a definition of out of sight, out of mind. Doing so will make the skill much less universally applicable, soft nerfing quite a few weapons, but in my opinion, just kicking that problem down the road. Instead of using the variety of weapons that benefit from cutting shot, people are going to gravitate towards the scoped SAA-144 and precision shot instead, actually reducing the variety of playstyles until inevitably precision shot gets nerfed and the entire cycle repeats itself. Constantly tracking down the most used skills in the game and trying to find novel ways to convince the player base to stop using them is just not sustainable. The thing is, to me, this problem is so obviously tied to Payday 3's lack of skill trees and flat build design that I don't see how they fix it without pivoting away from this system altogether. When you can pick up any skill in the game without sacrifice or investment, a subset of skills will always float to the top and be picked up in any build that's striving for some form of optimality. You could nerf every single skill in the game, and this would still happen. They've just made their job so much harder than it had to be by not tiering the cost of skills. It means everything is as accessible as everything else, no skills require prior investment or attempt to enforce a certain playstyle, so you never have to consider trade-offs or specialization. This has a negative impact on the role-playing, heist fantasy elements of the game, as I've mentioned before, but it's also led to this nightmare balancing situation that's impossible to address without pulling out its root cause. Picture this, cutting shot is still an incredible skill doing exactly what it does as of Update 5, however, it's the apex skill in some sort of battle rifle tree, focused around single-fire weaponry. You can still absolutely specialise into it to turn your Ku-59 or Kar-4 into a one-shot machine, but due to the skill economy, doing so forces you to make some build sacrifices elsewhere, or alter your playstyle to be more locked into the benefits of playing around cutting shot. Maybe you'd lose access to ammo, funnel and replenish, meaning you need to make those one-shot kills count, or you'd be unable to specialise into assault rifle specific skills that buff body shots, akin to body expertise in Payday 2. You'd be trading out the ease and accessibility of a standard assault rifle build in order to turn your weapons into precision, ammo-efficient monsters. Even if this remained the optimal way to play with these weapons, huge portions of the player base would likely continue to use standard assault rifle skills, either because they simply enjoy that playstyle more, or they appreciate an easier to pilot build. Those willing to make those accessibility sacrifices will be rewarded by an excellent and innovative build that might require a higher level of skill expression to make use of. It's a true win-win situation where neither type of player is actually punished. Essentially, I'm saying that I believe the current skill line system is doomed to be problematic forever, and tunneling further into it is just turning a blind eye to a potentially more rewarding approach. Every half-decent Payday build looks the same at this point, so I think something drastic needs to be done. I know not everyone agrees on this one, so happy to discuss in the comments, but I've got some real conviction in this argument, and I'm sharing it passionately internally as well. Phew, that was a longish rant without even getting into the core subject of the dev blog, that being the 6 loud modifiers coming to the game to up the ante on very hard and overkill. Firstly, on paper I think this makes a lot of sense. Security modifiers are a fine system for stealth, and I believe they can really build on those with the increased variance and mechanics of loud. Unfortunately, I don't think these initial 6 have achieved that and are generally missing the mark to the point where they'll either be too insignificant to even notice, or easy enough to play around as they don't really address what makes Payday 3 so easy at the moment. From top to bottom, we have Hard Bargain, making the custody system function as it did in Payday 2. That's to say you'll need to trade hostages during the end of an assault wave to get a teammate back. Now, surface deep, this is fine and makes a lot of sense. Apparently, it's how the game was originally designed. Hostage mechanics have been expanded to make taking and holding them easier, and if nothing else, it forces you to hold out to the end of an assault wave to trade back your teammates, instead of them inexplicably rejoining the fight out of nowhere. The problem is, this system is no longer mechanically supported by Payday 3. There are too many fail states that will lock your crewmates into custody permanently to make this enjoyable. For example, you need a skill to dominate cops now, meaning if you run out of civs on a heist, you can quite feasibly get locked into custody without any recourse. This doesn't sound fun. Similarly, final charges result in endless assaults and exist on every heist, meaning if you go down late, you'll be gone for good. It's not that it's too punishing, I think it's more that it's unfun. Counterplay is limited and no one plays the game to be a spectator. To be clear, I don't think any of these issues will actually come to pass because the game is so easy at the moment, you can just avoid custody and hard bargain altogether, but even so, I do think they need to rethink our ability to take police hostages if they do want to commit to this modifier. Next, we have Buddy System, allowing 2 instances of each special unit to be on the map at once, also raising the special cap to help facilitate this. Whilst it's just a numerical tweak in the code, which is a bit boring, this is probably the highest impact modifier that might force players to play slightly differently. The possibility of facing down 2 dozers at once is genuinely daunting, and the special population was probably too low to make the kind of impact they were intended to up against a full team. If we ignore cloakers, who spawn too often in my opinion to even take you by surprise anymore. Armor piercing is just a bad idea. I hate it. All it does is make 10% of damage SWATs deal to armor apply to your health as well. This means you'll constantly be taking chip damage, punishing any playstyle that doesn't involve sitting in a corner. Let me remind you why people don't like Payday 3's base game armor system. It's because they don't enjoy taking constant fatigue damage anytime they try and do anything. It's unfun, unintuitive, and it's bad. The idea is that it punishes armor stacking, which is kinda hilarious because that's no longer the meta as of the last patch, with Fortitude and Adrenaline coming to the game. I don't think it's going to move the needle at all, it'll just mean you'll be using up 1 or 2 more FAKs every heist, but just the sheer frustration of taking extra unavoidable damage will be enough to piss people off, to be frank. They did not read the room on this one whatsoever. Alpha Strike makes heavy SWAT units spawn immediately from the first assault. This will probably make the game marginally more challenging, although most of the best builds in the game now have ways to deal with these guys in a single shot, so it's not going to be too hard to handle. In the instance people do struggle with heavy SWATs, my fear is that it's gonna make Payday 3's speedrun problem even more pronounced. Squads might start rushing objectives even more intently now to not have to hang around dealing with these guys, actually accentuating one of the problems the core game already has, that being the burning desire to get the gameplay portion of the game over with as quickly as possible. Reflector shields are a fine idea. I know people don't love shield marshals in Payday 2, but I think they're mechanically very rich and fairly neat. Their problem is the invincibility window they get after losing their shield, which shouldn't be an issue here. I'd like to point out that flashbang shields are the only true new bits of content that will be arriving with the loud modifier system. Everything else is just a tweak in the code. I really hoped all the modifiers would be designed more along the lines of this one, you know, adding new enemy types or cop strategies to the game to actually add some much needed replayability to the few heists we have. I was hoping for skull dozers or incendiary grenadiers. Unavoidable health damage and perma-jail wasn't on my bingo card, strangely enough. Anyway, the final modifier revealed in today's blog is debilitating specials, making it so that all specials have a way to switch off edge, grit and rush by hitting you with their signature attacks. I'm sure people love this already fiddly system requiring even more micromanagement. Whilst it sounds frustrating, on the face of it most builds have incredibly easy methods of activating grit, edge and rush, so even if you're struck by this, you'll simply need to switch weapons or throw in pick up a bag and you'll be right back to whatever you were doing. This modifier sucks twofold in my opinion, because not only will it be a minor inconvenience disrupting gameplay, it'll also make the game precisely 0% harder, failing to achieve its intended goal. That's it for the modifiers, and whilst they're not all bad, as a collective I think they're going to fail at their desired task of making the game harder, and it's not because they're playing softball, it's as a result of them misfiring at the actual issues the game has. None of them lean into producing greater randomization to keep players on their toes, and equally, none force you to slow down to make it through a heist successfully. If anything, they encourage you to speed up, accentuating that attrition issue that makes you want to get up a heist almost as soon as you step on it. More worryingly, because some of them are designed to be fundamentally unfun, bearing in mind they'll rotate as security modifiers do, it could lead to players avoiding certain heists altogether whilst active. This will compound the issue of only having 10 loud heists to choose from, as Payday 3 really can't afford to lose any of its very sparse roster. Again, it doesn't seem to be well thought out. To be clear, I'm not negative about this blog post in general. I actually think it's a solid conveyance of what's to come with well-worded descriptions that at least help us understand the logic behind the planned changes. Unfortunately, I just don't think we're singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to what we want to see for Payday 3 and what the game really needs. The blog finishes off by touching on the new difficulty they're working on, that's being saved until at least year 2 of the game, as well as mentioning 2 new unrevealed stealth modifiers coming alongside these new loud ones, which is appreciated. But after all that, I've got to say I'm worried about the future of Payday 3, because I don't see an appetite to turn it around. Maybe it's just Operation Medit Bag Blues, but we're almost 5 months into 2024 and have yet to even see the sparks of any tangible reasons to return and play Payday 3 again. It's all well and good trying to make the game more playable, but you need a player base willing to actually play it to make any difference. And on that cheery note, that's been today's Kknowley Howls at the Moon video. Be sure to comment your thoughts on these upcoming changes. I do think this is the sort of topic that needs a bit of back and forth around it. And remember to follow the link down in the description to check out my range of Apex gaming PCs. As ever, thank you so much for the support. Take care, I'll see you all very soon in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.